Hello friends, welcome back to another Alpha League sesh with me, AVB. If you're new to the channel, welcome. This is where we dive deep into the latest products and trends of the NEAR and Aurora ecosystem. Today, I'm thrilled to present you the NEAR DeFi Starter Pack. The reason why this channel exists is because you may have realized that NEAR and Aurora are exploding recently, but let's be honest, this is all either VC money or early crypto people. This channel exists to onboard the masses. Even though we have a blockchain that is cheap, fast, efficient, that can scale horizontally in dynamic async sharding and whatnot, the real challenge with blockchain and crypto is how to present this to the masses in a way that they care, that they understand it, that they're able to use it. I am thrilled to present to you this NEAR DeFi Starter Pack for you to consume at your own leisure. It will be a long video, there will be timestamps at the bottom. You can jump around to the section that interests you the most. But the most important thing is not only should you be able to go from an absolute beginner to a proficient magic money master, but if you're already a guru of the decentralized interwebs, you should be able to share this video to all your friends and family and help onboard them. Remember that we are on a mission to bring the next million people to the decentralized web. Today we're going to be covering some very important topics. First, why DeFi? What is the problem that the blockchain is trying to solve? What is the promise or the vision that we're building towards? This is a journey, we're not there yet, but I think that if we understand the key driving forces behind the DeFi movement, it is a lot easier to get around it. Second, basic concepts. It is a well-known problem in the crypto world that we tend to throw around worlds and principles and strategies, and we assume that people know what we're talking about. We will be explaining some of the most common one in the simplest possible terms, just to make sure that any mention or reference along the way, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Third, we're going to look into the key players of each one of the verticals. And finally, we're going to look at some simple strategies that you may want to consider if you decide that DeFi suits your risk profile and you would like to put some capital to work. Now, let's get started. First and foremost, why DeFi? To get a better understanding of the value proposition of decentralized finance, we must compare it and contrast it with traditional finance. And here we have two important points. The first is there are things in traditional finance that DeFi is improving on, but the second one is traditional finance has not even been widely available across the world. To explore these, I'd like to draw your attention to the works of Hernando de Soto, specifically a book called The Mystery of Capital, Why Capitalism Triumphs in the West and Fails Everywhere Else. Hernando has won the Nobel Prize of Economics for his work, and I had the joy of reading this in 2016, 2017, and it really did change my framework of the world. The book goes into quite a bit of detail of economics and financial modeling and maths, but I'm going to summarize it in a way that it's almost criminal by how simple it is, but I hope it resonates. Basically, Hernando de Soto explains how the financial and the capitalist system works. It's basically paper money upon paper money. I'll give you a simple example. Say you buy a house for $60,000 in the 1970s, and the value of the house increases over time. It may be worth $600,000 today. In the West, if you have your title of property, you're able to go to any bank and borrow against that house. So even though there hasn't really been any exchange of money, you have certainly not paid $600,000 for the property. You're able to borrow hundreds of thousands of dollars that you can invest in most likely other property, keeping the cycle of growth going, or invest in your business, or whatever the case may be. There is money available to you. This is the magic multiplying effect of money. Likewise, if you register a business and you've got $10,000 worth of revenue per month, there would be a multiplier there. You're able to go to a bank, or you're able to raise private capital from investors and reinvest in your business, grow it. At the end of 5 years, if you retire, you can sell your business or list it on the public exchange. There's a lot of options there where money seems to come and go and multiply in ways that are very powerful for people that are able to leverage these tools. When we contrast this to the developing world, we have a completely different story. Most people in the developing world do not have legal title to the property that they live in. And this is important because the property that people live in is people's main source of wealth worldwide. So you can immediately see how the lack of property rights immediately locks people out from accessing financing. And we're talking about life-changing capital here. Likewise, most of the developing world still has a cash economy or the informal economy. There aren't any legal entities that you register your business through. You simply go out to the streets, and if you're making $10,000 a month revenue, you've got $10,000 in your hand. At the end of 5 years, or whenever you stop working, money stops coming in, and that's the end of the story. So you can see how people doing the exact same work in very different legal and financial systems can capture and multiply the value in completely different ways. And you may be thinking, that's actually quite shit. Why don't we have a proper financial system in the developing world? Hernando de Soto points out a few problems which he's actually been trying to address for a very long time. The first one is corruption. The second one is, and these are all tightly related. The first one is corruption. The second one is lack of property rights. The third one is a lack of a legal framework that is pro-business friendly. Here, the important thing is to enable people to enter into transactions with each other, and for these contracts to be enforceable. And if there are any legal disputes, for the courts to work efficiently, both time-wise, cost-wise, and corruption-wise. And then finally, poor account record keeping. Some of these historical documents were written by hand in a piece of paper that got lost when they moved offices or the office burned down. There are just historical challenges that keep mounting on. So I think that was a pretty good preamble to the value of blockchain. And I'm just going to highlight some of the key properties of blockchain technology. And this is blockchain in general. We haven't even started digging into NEAR's blockchain specifically. Blockchain seems like a dream when you encounter these issues for two reasons. The first one is blockchain is nothing more than a public ledger. When transactions get recorded, they're recorded there in a permanent, immutable, and accessible way. What does it mean? Historical transactions cannot be changed. They will always be accessible on the blockchain, and they can be accessible by anyone, anywhere in the world. So now we start to change the course of history. Now we have a shared understanding of who owns what. And these, for regions that have been crippled by poor governance and record keeping, is a game changer. The second thing that blockchain introduces is programmable logic. And this one addresses a problem with the financial world that is actually also plaguing the West. Namely, because we have humans that are prone to error or corruption operating the banks that are multiplying the money, they decide who gets a credit and under what circumstances. We inevitably end up with financial bubbles every 10 years. So the government response is to just keep adding more and more layers of regulation, more and more layers of checks and balances, all of which, by the way, are operated by the same humans who are also prone to corruption and error. So anyway, all that this arguably overregulation ends up doing is severely increasing the cost of providing financial services. And naturally, the banks aren't going to take on that cost on themselves. They pass on that cost to the consumer. That means that it is becoming more and more expensive to serve each consumer at a traditional bank. So the line of your minimum net worth and your minimum income for you to be worth servicing by the bank keeps going up. This means that even if you live in a wealthy country that has a functional financial system that serves the wealthy that own property or that have businesses well, there are a ton of people that aren't able to access the financial system because it is just not worth it for the banks. So blockchain introduces something fascinating that I think we're barely scratching the surface of, and that is programmable logic, also known as smart contracts on the street. With programmable logic, the code basically replaces entire buildings worth of humans and regulation and compliance. Whichever parameters you code into that smart contract will be executed efficiently over and over again. It can't be corrupted. Unless there is an actual error in the code at the outset, it can't be corrupted. And you can see how suddenly we've got a system that is much, much cheaper, which brings down the barrier of access to everyone, but also it is accessible to everyone in the world. You don't have to be a citizen of a particular country to be able to access. I've taken the time to provide this perspective of DeFi because I am aware that there are so many things happening and so many moon boys and Lambos rushing for money that sometimes it may be easy to lose sight of the North Star or the mission, the vision. Why are we building what we're building? It is true that we're not there yet, But if we understand the real promise of DeFi and where we're heading, I think it is much easier to see the value and to honestly just get excited about it and want to get involved early. Now let's move on to some basic concepts. AMM and DEX. AMM stands for Automated Market Maker and DEX stands for Decentralized Exchange. Sometimes people use them interchangeable, which may add to the confusion. An AMM is a type of decentralized exchange. The key difference is that an AMM is a very simple swap. You simply enter the asset that you have and the asset that you want, and it automatically gives you a price and it swaps it for you. The difference with the decentralized exchange is it would have a full order book, or it may look more like a Binance or a KuCoin, where you can see all the price and order and all the orders at every level, and it may also even have extra functionality like enabling you to create orders at a certain price or create stop losses. It just adds a more complex trading structure. So an AMM, the software or the code automatically sets the price based on the ratio of each asset in each pool, and anyone is able to engage with an AMM not just to perform swaps but also to provide liquidity to the pools and to the farm. Which brings us to the next point. LP stands for liquidity provider. So when we decentralize the whole financial stack and we have lines of code executing all these transactions, we certainly have a problem, which is, where does the liquidity come from? There have to be assets available for people to swap. In the decentralized world, anyone can provide liquidity into liquidity pools. For liquidity pools, you need to provide each asset in equal parts. So we can see here some of the top pools on Ref Finance. And this is closely linked to another concept that sometimes people also confuse, which is farming. Liquidity provision through a pool and farming are technically separate. So in a decentralized exchange like Ref, anyone can create a pool. You can pair any two assets together and you can provide liquidity to that pool. So hypothetically, if you have your own token and you want to provide liquidity for it, you can do. In fact, I'll show you something cool. I created the AVB token and I added liquidity to it myself. It's got $70 worth of liquidity, which is arguably not very much, but this is just an example of the power of a decentralized exchange. Anyone can create and add liquidity to a pool. Farms are slightly different because they are incentivized liquidity pools. With a traditional liquidity pool, you would receive fees from every time there is a swap that uses your liquidity pool. With incentivized farms, there are additional rewards to encourage people to join specific liquidity pools. So I'm currently on Ref Finance, and you can see that there are farms that have very high percentages. These percentages are coming from the additional rewards that different projects volunteer. We can see that in the stNEAR pool, which is one of the most popular ones, there are a ton of extra rewards and incentives for people to join. Traditionally, each pool would provide its own assets. So for instance, on the Shallow and the Ref pool, we can see that there's a Shallow and the All Bridge token, which is a bridge used to send things to Ref. We'll get to bridges in a minute. Farming tends to be available on most AMMs and decentralized exchanges, which takes us to the next point. And this is a really important one because this is how you assess the risk of whether you want to enter into a liquidity pool or a farm. This is the concept of impermanent loss. Impermanent loss refers to potential losses that you may suffer due to changes in the price and composition of assets in the liquidity pool. I'll give you the most simple example I can think of. Let's say that you enter a NEAR USDC pool. You put $100 worth of NEAR and $100 worth of USDC. If NEAR is pumping, so the price is increasing rapidly and people are buying and buying NEAR from that liquidity pool, all it means is that you're selling NEAR cheap along the way as price increases. So impermanent loss would mean that you started with $100 worth of each asset and you may end up with $130 worth of USDC and $70 worth of NEAR. But if you had kept the original amount of NEAR because of the capital increase, you would have more money. This gets a little bit mathematical, this gets a little bit complex. All you need to know is that at the moment, the incentives for joining farms are so high that it very easily makes up for any impermanent loss. However, you do have to take it into account because you may see some surprises as you pull out funds from your pool. You may thought you had more NEAR and you have more USDC. This is especially important if you feel really strongly about accumulating either one of the two coins that you're adding to the pool. The next key concept is that of lending or leveraging. So a lending platform is probably the easiest one to grasp because it is basically a decentralized version of a bank. You're able to deposit assets and you're able to borrow money against those assets. So this is probably the closest thing to the example that we had from Hernando de Soto. And the reason why we're entering into such a special time in blockchain technology, because right now we can see the layer 1 assets such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, NEAR, Solana, Avalanche. This would be the real estate, and right now you're able to leverage against that. So basically you would never really sell these appreciating assets, but you're able to access liquidity against them to reinvest in any way that you see fit. So for the lending platforms, there's a couple of key concepts. The first one is LTV. LTV is also known as a collateral factor, or how much you can borrow against your assets. The LTV changes for each asset. So if you click on stNEAR, we'll see that the collateral factor is 70%. So for every $100 worth of stNEAR that you deposit, you're able to borrow $70 out. There's a few other key things that you need to understand from a lending platform. Just like a bank, there are interest rates that you will earn or have to pay for depositing or borrowing assets. So that would be here in the APY section. This would make it very attractive, for instance, to deposit things like DAI at the moment. You would receive up to 8%. And conversely, if you go to the borrow section, you can see how much you would have to pay by lending each one of these assets. Now, LTV or collateral factor and borrow or APY are the same across all lending platforms. The final thing that you may have noticed is that there is a column here for BRR rewards, and that ref gives you the ref token, and that basically every one of the platforms that we will be going through in just a minute also gives you their native token. This brings us to the next concept, and that is yield farming or liquidity mining. This presents some unique opportunities for being so early in the game. So basically, because these platforms are decentralized, they tend to have a native token, which is a governance token. Who owns or controls this smart contract that operates on the interwebs and anyone can engage with? So there's two challenges that these platforms have. The first one is, how do we attract liquidity? And the second one is, how do we distribute ownership of these platforms in a way that is fair to the community and keeps them decentralized? And the answer is, during the early days, all these platforms distribute their native token, which tends to be a governance token, to the users. These tokens, as we may have seen from other ecosystems such as Ethereum, can actually become quite valuable because having control over some of the parameters of these platforms as they accumulate hundreds of millions or billions of dollars is actually really valuable. So yield farming or liquidity mining refers to supplying liquidity to these platforms in such a way that you're maximizing how much you can earn. And I'll give you a simple example. Right now you can see that you receive BRR rewards for both supplying assets and borrowing assets. So even though you would have never really thought, or you would have never seen a use case for borrowing Bitcoin, there are 30,000 BRR to be distributed every day. So if you were to do some yield farming or liquidity mining, you'll basically start to identify all those opportunities of which coins are being distributed where, and then put together a strategy where you maximize the amount of coins that you're receiving from each exchange. I would refer to this as a land grab. Naturally, the amount of coins that each one of these projects have to give out is limited, and this is something that will only be appealing during the early stages. If we fast forward 10 years time and there are 100 million people relying on Borrow Cash or similar platforms to access financing, naturally, they won't still be giving out additional incentives to attract people, and this could potentially be a really good play for those who got in early. A final concept that is related to lending platforms is leveraging or folding. This basically refers to the practice of putting down an asset as collateral. In this case, I would recommend stNEAR. Then you borrow USD against it. So say you put down $100 of stNEAR, you borrow $70 worth of DAI or USDT, and then you buy more NEAR, you stake it again, and you repeat the loop. You basically repeat the cycle to accumulate as much as you want of the asset that you want to hold in long term and that you believe could be appreciating in capital, while maintaining your debt in USD, which has a fixed value. And you just have to worry about the interest rate. Now, the reason why I recommend stNEAR brings us to the next point, which is liquid staking. Liquid staking is perhaps one of the most interesting concepts in DeFi and one that I am obsessed with. Just a quick recap. NEAR is a proof of stake blockchain, which means that NEAR tokens must be deposited into validators and locked there to help secure the network. As a reward for helping secure the network, you earn about 10.5%. But you can see the challenge that there are much more attractive opportunities out there in DeFi right now. So what liquid staking does is it enables you to deposit your NEAR onto validators, and they give you a token back, which you can go then use anywhere in the DeFi ecosystem. So you're basically having the same funds in two places at once. The first and main liquid staking solution in NEAR is Metapool. When you deposit your NEAR with Metapool, they give you back stNEAR. So if you go back to borrow cash, you'll see that you can deposit your stNEAR, which is an asset earning you 10% in NEAR, and borrow against it. This creates some magical combinations such as, if I'm earning 10% on my NEAR and I borrow USDC at 7%, and this is pretty high at the moment, I suspect this will come back down over time, you basically have a self-repaying loan. This is a unique feature that would not be the case if you borrow money against BTC or against plain NEAR or against ETH. So staking, as I mentioned, enables you to earn 10% on your NEAR deposits. The easiest way to stake would be to go to the NEAR main wallet.near.org. There is a staking tab, and just follow the prompts. If you do it this way, you do have to choose a validator. This may involve doing some research as to which validator has the best uptime and which percentage fee you feel comfortable paying. There is one special mention here, which is the Aurora validator. Now, NEAR has something really unique where validators themselves can offer additional rewards. Aurora, which is the EVM blockchain deployed on top of NEAR, they run a validator that charges 99% fee. Now, this may seem crazy, but the way it works is they keep 99% of the NEAR that you would have received as a reward, but in turn, they give you Aurora rewards. So this would be a good validator to choose if you would rather get rewards in Aurora. And depending on the price of NEAR and the price of Aurora, this validator would probably actually give you higher rewards at the moment. Otherwise, my top pick for staking is always Metapool. When you stake with Metapool, it automatically distributes your stake across 87 validators. Just to clarify, Metapool is not a validator themselves. They distribute the NEAR across all these validators. However, as we just mentioned, Metapool has the extra benefit of being able to obtain stNEAR and unlocking massive rewards in the DeFi world. And that's the end of part 1. I really do apologize for the abrupt ending, but the original recording went for over 1 hour and I had to make the strategic decision to split this DeFi starter pack into multiple part series. So make sure that you subscribe to be notified when part 2 drops. In part 2, we will be exploring everything centralized exchanges, bridges, AMM, and DEXs. Once again, thanks so much for your support, and I'll see you all soon.